And Anthony is a retired lieutenant colonel who was a whistleblower from the United States military, speaking out on the actions that the United States has helped Israel perpetuate genocide in Gaza. So with that, I think we'll start with Anthony, especially because Anthony was telling me before this a very relevant news story that you may have heard where he was present as well. So I look forward to you finding what news story that was in the speech. So without further ado, I yield my time to you. And then,
well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to your community, inviting me to North Dakota. This is my first time in North Dakota, so I'm very happy to be here, especially to be discussing the topic of human rights. It's very important to me, as it should be to everyone. And I believe that human rights means everyone, and that when we say we the people in this country, it means everyone. And I think over the last 5 years, especially in the last 12 months, but also over the history of this empire, we are seeing a further trajectory away from human rights. And now is the time to focus on that and bring that back, because there's so much going on. And sharing my experience today, I'm going to talk about Gaza, but I'm also going to talk about how that experience and what I saw there also has implications here in our country, especially with ICE and the DHS and other organizations that we're seeing bringing those tactics of apartheid, those tactics of oppression, back here to the United States in our streets. But then also how that connects and how it's a direct correlation to this war that we're now seeing against Iran. Because in my opinion, the corollary between all of these is human rights, or the lack thereof, or the dehumanization of others. So, starting off with Gaza in Palestine, the occupied territory. I did not go to Gaza as an activist or someone that was there to prove a point or to show the world something that I thought was being hidden from the world. I had just retired from the military at 25 years as a Green Beret. I had fought in war for 25 years. I was on the edges of the empire in this continued colonialism of the U.S. endeavors overseas in the wars that we have fought, quite frankly, the illegal, unethical, immoral wars that we have fought. And I really didn't want to be involved in going to places where there was war and conflict. But I got a phone call from this newly created Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and they were specifically looking for retired military that had a background in war zones to help establish this new aid mechanism. And I said, well, I've been watching the news, and it seems like aid and humanitarian assistance has been going on in Gaza for quite some time. What's changed? Oh, well, UNRWA and the United Nations are no longer allowed to operate. Oh, why? That doesn't seem like a good idea. Well, political decisions have been made, so the new mechanism for that is going to be the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And I thought maybe I was just out of the loop. I'd never heard of them. So I Googled them, and the reason I'd never heard of them because they were just created. This was last March that they were created. So I got out of the military on March 1st of 2025, so I've been out a year. At that point, I'd only been out for 2 months. Didn't realize that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation existed, and it did. So I did some research, and I saw, okay, well, and when they called me on May 13th and asked if I wanted to go on this mission to Gaza, I said, well, that's a pretty big ask. How long do I have to think about it? And they said, well, we're leaving Thursday. This was on a Tuesday, that same week. So I was like, oh, well, 24 hours. Like, okay, when do you need an answer? And they said, well, by tomorrow morning. So I said, well, my answer is not no, but my answer is not yes. Let me think about it. So I got out a notebook and I wrote down, what does Tony know? What does he know to be true? Well, human beings need food to survive. Human beings are being oppressed and withheld from food and water. They need that, regardless of who they are, human beings. 2, the mechanism of aid that once stood where there were 400 distribution sites and 600 trucks of aid going in every day had been stopped. Fact. Well, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is this organization that's been stood up to deliver that aid, and they've asked me to be a part of it. So humans need food, there's no food going in. This is the mechanism to do it. I want to be a part of it. That's all I knew. When I got there and we began operating in Gaza, the truth became prevalent. And it was a truth that was ugly. It was a truth that was inhumane. It was a truth that for me was very hard to accept, having been in the military and served this government for 25 years. It was something that I did not want to accept, that I wanted to look away from and pretend, well, this isn't my problem. But in my head, I knew that if this is what we're seeing here, it is only a matter of time before we see this at home. The tyranny that we exploit, the tyranny and the oppression that we bring to others comes back home. It's a concept called the imperial boomerang, and it is real. In Gaza, the humanitarian aid that we were delivering was not intended to feed people. It was designed as a deception, a military deception, clearly designed with the Israeli Defense Forces and the Israeli government to serve as bait, to put just enough food in the south to draw all Palestinians from Gaza, from the north, from the central, and from Rafah in the south, to the far part of the south, to then completely carpet bomb and destroy the entire Gaza enclave. That was the plan. Now, when we got there, the plan they explained to us was we're going to deliver aid. I said, okay, well, there were 400 sites. How many sites are we going to be operating right off the bat? It's going to take time to get here. Well, 3. 3 sites for 2.1 million people? It's like, I'm not a rocket scientist, but that doesn't seem like that's going to meet the requirement. How many trucks are we going to bring in? 12. 12 an hour, 12 a minute, 12 a day. I was like, okay. We just got a briefing from USAID, which at this time was going through its shuttering process. The United States government shut down USAID. And they gave us a briefing on 400 distribution sites and 600 trucks of aid. And I was like, we just got a briefing from people that have been doing this for years that it takes 400 sites and 600 trucks and we're going to do 3 sites and 12 trucks a day? How is that going to sustain us? It was never meant to. It was meant to bait Palestinians to the south, give them the dilemma of you die in place or you come down here and you get food. And when they left their homes to get food in the south, their homes were destroyed. And now I think everybody in what we've seen that's finally coming out in some bit of media, the little bit that we're able to see, it's very clear what the plan was. The entirety of Gaza is decimated, devastated. 550 tons of rubble that will take from now until 2025 to clear. And it is not only a genocide, it is an ecocide. The planet will be impacted by this. It is an infanticide. The next generation, and the next generation of Palestinians in Gaza has been wiped out. And that is a fact. And what that showed me is that Gaza, this is not just a Palestinian struggle. This is the front line of humanity. Because the world is looking away. This isn't something that is happening in Central Europe, in the forests of Europe by the German military hidden from the world. We see it every day. We see it on our phone. We see it on our TV. We see it on our apps, on our news feeds. We see it. And if you don't believe it, it's true. It's true. Right now, as Israel continues to defend, fight, and fire missiles or deflect missiles from Iran, they are still dropping bombs in Gaza. In fact, just last night, they killed 32 people in northern Gaza. They dropped a bomb on a school. It's real. I've been in every war that this country has fought in the last 25 years. I was in the Army for 25 years. From a lieutenant up to lieutenant colonel, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Lebanon, Jordan, the Philippines, Tajikistan, places that most Americans don't even know we were fighting war. Every war this country has been involved in the last quarter century, I have had boots on the ground, these boots on the ground. And what I witnessed in Gaza broke me. Never in my life, in all the places that I've been, and I'm talking about Mosul in the fight against ISIS, Raqqa, Syria in the fight against ISIS, Afghanistan, the sectarian violence in Iraq in the 05 and 06 when there was not only a civil war going on, but also post-invasion. And when I drove into Gaza on the 24th of May, 2025, I had no words. I was devastated by the fact that an entire region, once with thousands of people in schools and mosques and churches and playgrounds and daycare centers, gone. Every bit of it. Every church, mosque, hospital, daycare, community center, school, gone. Rubble to the ground. And in that rubble, as the bombing continues, as we were driving through, you can hear the cries of Palestinians trapped beneath the rubble. So when the death toll is told to me to say it's around 70,000, and that's what the IDF acknowledged, and that's what the Gaza Health Ministry acknowledges. It's not correct. There are hundreds of thousands of dead, because there are hundreds of thousands buried beneath the rubble who will never be recovered. When I was there and I saw the tactics that were being employed by not only the IDF, the military, but also by these contractors that were hired, of which I was one. The majority of the contractors that were hired were part of this organization called the Infidels Motorcycle Club. They're a gang who espouse the belief that we should fight world jihad and all Muslims should be eradicated from the earth. I was not a part of the organization. I realized later that the reason I got hired at the last minute is because they needed last minute fills. Out of the 300 contractors, 280 of them were hired from the Infidels Motorcycle Club, and they needed a few more at the end. So this was a surprise to me. I'd never heard of it. But this tactic of shoot first, ask questions later, everybody in Gaza is Hamas. It doesn't matter if you were a 1-year-old or a 5-year-old going to get water, or a mother or a father or an elderly man or just somebody trying to survive. You're all Hamas. Anyone that's killed, automatically, they were a terrorist. They were terrorists. With no evidence for the world to see that it's not the case. As I left, I resigned. The day I resigned, the 12-day war started, so I was stuck. Couldn't get out of this one. Just like now, everything's closed. Airports, borders, everybody's in shelters. So for 12 days, I couldn't leave. And when I was finally able, day by day, in between the bombing, to make my way east towards Jordan, I stopped in towns along the way. Basically, as there was a slowdown in the bombing, I would take the night to move to the next town. So I wanted to get out, but I couldn't through any other means but Jordan. And as I was traveling, I went by one of the military bases in Beersheba, that's Southern Command. And I'd been to this base before. And on the front of this gate of this base, you have the IDF and the military, the Ministry of Defense emblems for Israel. But you also have the DHS symbol, our Department of Homeland Security, ICE, the DEA. This is a joint training center to which ICE, DEA, and other 3-letter agencies train with the IDF in Israel. They wear the same equipment, they execute the same tactics, they practice the same techniques, and they inculcate the same culture. And it is no shock and no surprise to me that some of the same individuals that had been hired by the United States government through the GHF to work in Gaza as part of the UG Solutions, the armed security, that many of those men are now working for ICE. And when I witnessed, we all witnessed,
Renee Good being killed, or Alex Creddy being killed, the immediate response to that was, oh, they're terrorists. They're domestic terrorists. That person's been shot. Can we render medical aid? No. Shoot first, ask questions later. Both of those situations identical to how the IDF operate in not only Gaza, but in the West Bank. And we've brought that home. Not only have we brought it home through tactics, we're bringing it home through technology. If any of you haven't heard, Palantir. Palantir operates and programs the drones that ICE use to surveil here in our country. That technology was built and refined in Gaza. That's a fact. How all this comes back to Iran and what we're seeing now. On the opening day of this war, this illegal, unethical, immoral, unjustified war, and it is a war. Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump, and others that may say it's just a military operation. This is war. We have crossed every line. And in doing so, on the very first day of operations, we bombed not once but twice a school that had nothing but young girls. That's a fact. That's not conspiracy, that's not hyperbole, that's not, well, I'm Republican or I'm a Democrat. That's a fact. And initially, the administration blamed Iran. And then the Israelis said, well, it wasn't Iran, but it wasn't us. And they pointed the fingers at us. And there has not been one military commander, not one person in this administration that has acknowledged it, said it's wrong, condemned it, or even apologized for it. And then now you have the Secretary of Defense claiming they're all going to die. We're going to kill them all. And that language, them, they, it's dehumanizing. It is taking human rights and throwing them out the window. Right now, in Tehran, oil rains down from the sky because we blew up the largest manufacturing facility in Tehran. On children, on mothers, on fathers. This idea that in Tehran, well, everybody's the enemy. They're all bad. Our own president said it. They're all evil. The first victim in war, or the first casualty of war, is the truth. Then follows the dehumanization. Then follows the lies. Then follows the, we're so close to victory. And then we never leave. Iraq. I was there in the beginning and I was there in the end. We're still there. 3 weeks after we invaded, mission accomplished. Oh, but now we have to rebuild society. In our eyes, not theirs. Well, now we have to stay because they can't do it themselves. Same thing in Afghanistan, same thing in Syria, same thing in the southern Philippines, same thing throughout the world. They can't do it without us. They. And that undermines the very nature of the value of humans, the value of others to have agency in their own lives. So what I witnessed in Gaza, on the ground of Gaza, and the streets and the neighborhoods of Gaza, and what I see now happening on the streets and the neighborhoods of our country, Minneapolis, Chicago, Oregon, and it's coming. In this last plenary session of the budget proposed passed, Department of Homeland Security was pseudo shut down for the last part of their funding. Well, the other $160 billion they already got, they're not shut down. And in that, they have a mission to raise 10,000 ICE agents by the end of 2027. It's in the DHS strategy. I didn't get that from the dark web or something that I read on a bathroom stall. It's true. 10,000 agents It'll be the largest law enforcement agency in the United States. 200 agents per every state. So if you've already seen what's happening, and that's just a trailer, it's frightening, and it's happening. We just asked for a $1.7 trillion defense budget for next year. On the heels of a $190 billion defense budget we got approved this year. And Donald Trump has just asked for $5 billion more. A $2 trillion defense budget is not a peacetime budget. It is a world war budget. Right now, the United States has its nuclear aircraft in the sky, its nuclear command and control aircraft in the sky, and last week we tested a tactical nuclear weapon off of the coast of California. Because we do not value human life. Because we do not value the lives of Iranians, or Iraqis, or Saudis. Let them all die. And if we don't make a stand for ourselves as human beings, and for all of humanity, regardless if you're black, brown, purple, green, regardless of what your religion, your gender, or your orientation, or how you live your life, we're all human. And we're all next if we don't stand against what's happening now. And it might be a world away. But if we can drop a nuke on a sovereign nation to end a war that we started, what's the limit when that oppression is then exercised against us? Thank you.